Welcome, Doom Patrollers, to my third and final, well, it's not really my final review because we've got the rest of the season to go. However, for me, I've been filming these reviews all within the space of a couple of days. For you, I guess it's kind of similar for you because I uploaded 2 reviews yesterday. This is my third review for Doom Patrol episode 3, Pain Patrol, and it was a fantastic episode. I uploaded it a day later because I as I've said in my previous reviews, I didn't want to like bombard the channel with 3 reviews that not everybody may have binged the almost 3 hours of Doom Patrol that we've gotten all in one drop. Putting all that aside now, I've been on a crazy Doom Patrol run watching these 3 episodes, and honestly, Pain Patrol I really liked. I can't tell you right off the top of my head which one's been my most favorite because they're all what I'm really happy to report and say, they've all been just as good as what you would want Season 2 to be coming off the bat of Season 1. And Pain Patrol, the message I liked behind this episode is that it was really about diving into everyone's mistakes almost, Chief mainly. And it was the perfect opportunity to do that with Red Jack being portrayed by Roger Floyd, who I thought did an amazing job. So yeah, mega happy with Red Jack this episode. Without further ado, guys, I'm going to get into episode 3, Pain Patrol, written by Tom Farrell and Tamara Betcher Wilkinson. I'm sorry if I butchered the name, but I want to give shout out to the writers. I never did that last season, and I want to make sure their names are heard because, you know, they write amazing stuff for this show, and honestly, just major kudos to them. So one of the most anticipated things for this season, believe it or not, going in, doing my breakdown videos, my news update videos for Season 2, was Red Jack. I was looking forward to seeing these villains. I was really interested to see how they adapted the source material, and it hasn't disappointed so far, and Red Jack was arguably probably my most entertaining new character addition of the season so far. It's kind of interesting because I would only say last season I wouldn't even want to call it filler, and not all filler is bad, by the way, but our only in-between kind of villain of the week-esque storyline we got was the Decreator and Recreator episode. And this season, we've already had these kind of 2 characters coming in, similar to, I guess you could call it, of like a typical CW show. You get a villain of the week, it gets wrapped up. And, you know, it's interesting to see Doom Patrol tackle that. Because if you would have told me, oh yeah, we're going to have Dr. Time come in like a weekly kind of villain, if you will, or like Red Jack, I would have been like, oh, I don't know, I didn't really know. Would Doom Patrol be able to do that? But they have. It was still a very good story whilst visiting more of the source material characters that we just didn't get a whole bunch of last season. It's wonderful seeing characters like that come to just an episode, be kind of resolved by the end of the episode, and yet still getting such a fantastic, faithful comic book adaptation. So with that beginning scene, and I'm pretty sure Abigail Shapiro played the younger Niles Calder. I don't know if any of you recognize that, but that was actually Dorothy. Either way, loved this because in my research going into Doom Patrol Season 2, I obviously wanted to learn more about the characters that we could be seeing, such as Red Jack. He was Jack the Ripper back in 1888 in London, in Whitechapel, and I like how they started this with the younger Niles Calder wandering around, you know, the streets, and lo and behold, a woman just gets tossed aside right up next to Niles. I'm sure if you know who Jack the Ripper is, the kind of target that he went after, girls who worked the streets, so to speak. And yeah, like it's just kind of cool in such a way how they're putting these characters into real life figures today. It's like, oh yeah, look, back then that was Red Jack. And if you didn't know already from how clear this episode was, he feeds off the pain of others. We had Dorothy asking why Cliff hates Niles so much. Did he do something wrong? And Niles admits that he made a very bad mistake, lots of them. And Dorothy asked, did he apologize? But as Rita kind of pointed out, some wounds can't really be healed by pretty words. And that's what I mean going into the deeper theme of this episode. That right there was kind of revisited upon several times, especially towards the ending where we saw Chief kind of sketching out a Robot Man 2.0. I think he really wants to go the extra mile to try and apologize, but like not only as he said himself to Dorothy at the end of the episode, but sometimes you have to do a bit more. And it's, yeah, that's what I really liked about this episode in particular with Pain Patrol, or just should I say Red Jack being visited into it. We got really a deeper dive at the whole mistakes that I made, or like when Dorothy broke Danny the Brick, for example. It's like I really felt like that was a crucial part that I took away from this episode. And I know that was the obvious intent, but I feel like it really will be the beginning of repairing those relationships for Cliff. I don't think anything's going to fix it, but like, let's say Chief did improve his suit. I don't really know what's going on there, by the way, but let's theorized that maybe somehow Niles can put some touch and sensitivity into Robot Man's, fingers, then that could mean a whole lot and show that he's really trying to make up for these impossible mistakes that he made. And this is when a bunch of butterflies appeared, and Chief knew exactly who this was because of the flashback to the younger Niles at the beginning of the episode. And that's when he read the letter saying that he was invited to dinner with the divine Red Jack. And they realized that Larry has been taken. And this is when this kind of brings in the situation that Rita is currently undergoing a little bit. Her confidence has been knocked down, especially after Dr. Time said what he did to Rita last episode, and how, your mother always viewed you as kind of like a failure and you'll never be nothing but that kind of thing. That came into play a little bit in this moment where she thinks she'll just make things worse. But that's what made this so much more important for me as a person who loves the character of Rita Farah, who's played by the actress of April Bowlby, the amazing April Bowlby, because there was that moment towards the end of the episode where she just goes ham, tries to save Larry. I know I'm jumping to it, but it's so relevant to what I want to say right now, and that was such an important moment. It's such a development for her character, and oh man, this episode was amazing for so many different things like that. But anyway, Red Jack, he lives in an extra dimensional palace, and he essentially what he does is he drops down into our world to refill like his palace with fresh pain. Like, as I said, he was Jack the Ripper, the monster of Florence. He was debriefing this all to Rita, and she was like, oh, well, if this is meant to sell me ongoing, that's not really helping. In the meantime, we have Larry, who's freaking chained to the ceiling in Red Jack's palace. You had those people in those, like, body bags beneath him, and this is Jack's genius way, if you will, in his mind of, creating more pain. Hey, why don't we get a guy who, if we take his bandages off, that will naturally release this potent radiation into the room and torture those people. Like, this is perfect. This is a perfect plan for Red Jack, but horrible for Larry. Like, he's having to literally put up with himself irradiating these poor people who are just like there, like getting sizzled and cooked on the floor. Like, that was pretty messed up. But it also gives a perfect example as to what Red Jack is all about. But this also gave us flashbacks to Larry's first time entering Doom Manor in 1966, and I really appreciated this because we haven't had so much of this, if at all. I mean, we have had some stuff last season, seeing these New Year's Eve parties of a few decades back, but it was really awesome seeing Larry, enter Doom Manor for the first time. But the thing that I took most out of this, and I think you can all agree, is this kind of friendship that happened between Rita and Larry. It was so special. I don't know. I love these two characters so much. But obviously Larry arrived in that hazmat suit so he doesn't irradiate everyone. I loved how Rita tried to relate to Larry by saying, I once played an aviatrix turned spy in The Spy Who Could Fly, or whatever that movie was. Rita always cracks me up. It's kind of crazy to think that Rita, at this point in Doom Manor, there really wasn't many people around. Now, this is after the ant farm. Larry did do a bit of a reference to that. I think we will be getting more flashbacks into his time in the ant farm, but this is after Niles saved him from that place, and he got that little gift of bandages that will contain the radiation. I kind of like to poke at like how a bandages, like as thin as normal bandages, supposed to literally keep in radiation that kills people. Like, we saw flashbacks to how many people he killed when he first got up after the accident. But comic book logic, these are special bandages. You don't question the work of Niles Calder. He will find the way, and so we got the get up of Larry Trainer that we know and love today. But back to Red Jack's extra dimensional kind of palace. We had Rita wandering around, and we saw those butterflies labeled on the walls, and these are his victims. And you can hear these screams throughout the palace, of course, because Red Jack is actually causing physical pain to those people at his feast, literally like just shanking random people playing the violin and stuff like that, or popping their eyeballs out. And yet again, I really liked Roger Floyd playing this role. I feel like he did a fantastic job, and it was actually borderline freaky. I'm not a guy who goes to horror films and gets scared unless it's supernatural with a girl just with hair over her face. That's the creepy side, I find. But other than that, honestly, I'm not fazed by much. But this was the way he played that role, with this divine-esque entity who feasts on pain, was done very, very well. I know I keep complimenting it, but really, I felt like it was a really good casting. But the whole reason why Red Jack summoned Niles Calder to his palace is because, well, A, he remembers him from when they first met when he was a kid, but he said, after countless centuries, the pain of loneliness has become somewhat of a blind fatage of my daily consumption. What I long for now is an equal, someone who revels in harvesting the agony of others as much as I. And I think this really pointed out to Niles in particular what he's done. Now, I'm not saying Niles Calder doesn't know what he's done, but to his excuse being that he went back into a corner to do anything for his daughter. But I think this stripped back an even deeper layer for Niles, that even he, after knowing what he's done, terrible things to these people, and he fully does regret it. That's why we had those ending scenes towards the end of the episode where he's really torturing himself about it. Looking at these pictures of Rita Farr and Cliff Steele, people who he literally destroyed their lives. Like, for crying out loud, we even had a flashback previously on Doom Patrol of this episode where, he says to Cliff that his daughter was expendable. Like, very bluntly so, not without, like, regret, but still, like, effed up stuff. And I think what Red Jack taught him is that this divine god-like person of pain, wants him to take over just in case anything happens, or to be his little sidekick of pain. And I think, when you're getting compared to someone like Red Jack, that really spells it out clear how much pain you've caused these people who, I'm not saying Niles doesn't love, but I think it really did peel back a layer that he can't even borderline look at himself in the mirror over. And that's why he started trying to improve the Robot Man suit. So we may see some changes for Robot Man coming up this season. He says that within a few short decades, they could perfect Niles' prowess for pain, and, this would entail eternal life. Conveniently what Chief kind of wants right now, what he even gave up to get them all back to normal size in episode 1. So that, that must have been like, oh, this could be an answer, but obviously Niles is like, no. But diving even further into those flashbacks of 1966, we actually had Larry profess that he actually is quite a big fan of Rita's, and how we could even tell that there was more to her as an actress, and that there was pain underneath all of her performances, and she didn't kind of really like hearing that. And this is where her face started melting, and Larry could kind of relate that obviously there's more people there just like him. But yeah, again, I think this is so important, and kind of like a foreshadowing that even though we haven't dived truly into Rita's past, and she'll be tackling her relationship with her parents, this was kind of symbolic of what we're yet to see, I think, because there is pain in Rita's past with her parents and stuff like that, and I think that this moment was meant to signify that and tease it a little bit. This next part of the episode was definitely one of my favorites and highlights. This was because it was also combined with the specific flashbacks of Rita and Larry, but going back to Rita and Larry in present day in the palace, Larry was obviously irradiating those people in the chamber with him. We've already been over that, but it was getting even worse to the point of where in this scene everyone was sprouting wings. Like Chief was sprouting wings, and this was graphic, not blood or gore or anything like that, but it was graphic in a whole new weird way where I even got weirded out. Yet again, with horror films, I am not fazed by violence or gore at all, but those wings coming out, the effects on that were amazingly detailed, but it was just something. They were basically starting, the pain that they had all mustered in these moments in the episode, all happening at the same time. They were becoming like one of those butterflies to where Red Jack wants you to blossom forever on the wall, contributing to the pain of the palace that he has in that kind of extra dimensional place. So they were all transforming into butterflies, yet again to add on to the kind of regret that Chief is undergoing in this episode. Red Jack was inflicting pain onto him through letting him live and experience what it must be like to be Robot Man. That will just make, Chief feel terrible for what he put and forced upon Cliff Steele's life. But that moment when Rita was getting irradiated by Larry, going in anyway, and using what Cyborg has helped teach her and her own power within to stretch out and save Larry. Honestly, I think you guys know how much shilling basically of Rita that I've done the past couple of episodes, but I feel like her character development out of these 3 episodes have been the best so far. I mean, everyone else is cooking. Like, there's a few, you've got a few things on the hob, on the back burner, so to speak, with the other characters. But Rita, oh man, I feel like hers has been the most special so far for me, I think, out of these 3 episodes. And that moment was badass. And good on you, Rita, because you proved that, you're not a mess up or like what you thought you were after Time Patrol. At this point, Chief stabs Red Jack, so he is dying, and it's kind of messed up because he's loving the pain at the same time. All of those butterflies being his victims, are getting freed by Larry and Rita. That is kind of reminiscent of the comic book counterpart storyline of Red Jack, yet all of this was done a little bit differently. I'm not going to explain exactly what happens in the comic book story, but the way Red Jack goes down is similar, like it's done like with a freaking kitchen knife, but it wasn't Chief who killed Red Jack, and the storyline surrounded quite different circumstances, but the way they adapted it to Doom Patrol Season 2 in this episode was still such a welcome new footprint, or should I say steps on traditionalist canon, that I have no complaints about. If anything, I loved this version. So yeah, Red Jack stuff, I'll summarize all my feelings at the end, but that was the main gist with all of that storyline with Larry, Rita, Chief, and Red Jack. But what about Cliff and Jane's story this episode? I've always wondered what would happen with Cliff and his daughter this season. I don't know if I expected him to literally walk up to her house with the Doom Patrol bus and just be like, hey, I'm your dad. However, starting at the beginning, loved how Cliff was venting in the bus. I love how they're listening to the fans. I think they all know anyway that we all love Cliff and Jane scenes, but I love where he's just like, hey, you want to get the F out of here? And she's like, yeah, that those two are such a dynamic duo now. But on the bus, where Cliff is just ranting and Jane just goes into the underground and she just passes out, Diane Guerrero, that moment was absolutely hilarious. But anyway, we're really stepping up to, I think we can all tell, Miranda coming as the new primary, because Jane's been getting these messages, time for a change, for quite a while now, and she had to confront it this episode because there was more or less an intervention with the main, or just, I guess, a few of her personalities out of the many that she does have. So the personalities were talking about how they feel about Jane, the current primary. You know, it's not really cool, her taking drugs. For example, Baby Doll wants to run and sing. She can't exactly do that when she's drugged up and sleepy. We've all seen that, for example, last episode where everyone's just chilling on the field, all spaced out. I kind of understand where they're coming from here, but there's another thing. There is a larger point to all of this, that they don't really like her hanging out with her reliance on the Doom Patrol and Niles Calder. Apparently that is her low-key bigger addiction rather than even the serum. However, I love Jane's counter to that. She still says that they're her family, and that was a huge moment. Like, she's acknowledging a long time ago she would have bailed after what Chief, she found out what Chief did, but now she realizes she's still got to stay because the Doom Patrol cares about her, even Niles. So I think that is quite very big of Jane. That's why she hasn't exited now. I was really wondering about Jane this season. How is she going to react? How is she even going to be around after knowing what he had done? But it seems that she's already addressed that. And I think a big part of it is Dorothy, because she didn't want to see her ending up like the older Doom Patrol in that asylum. Plus, as she says, everyone cares about her. So I think she likes where she is. However, there is basically this ultimatum offered that the true addiction is not the serum, it's Niles Calder and her friends. So leave Niles or lose your post as primary. And it does look like that will be happening because, well, from the trailer, we know that Miranda is in Doom Manor. And Miranda does look like someone to be reckoned with. So it's going to be interesting seeing a new primary this season. Looks like Jane may be on the sub bench, so to speak. However, back to Cliff. Yeah, again, very surprising that he drove to his daughter's house. But at the same time, maybe not, because we knew we were edging towards that. Cliff can't really hack all of this frustration. His frustration is boiling like a kettle to the point where it's going to explode. So in this episode, I think he got to that boiling point where he just wanted to get to know his daughter a bit more, tells her that he's her father, explains the car crash, all of that, and it's like, we good? This got to the point where the police arrived, because you must be imagining how baffling this could be for someone if your father turned up and they're like a metal robot. I actually don't know how clear it is what his daughter is thinking. Does she believe this? Does she think it's just a prank like she initially did? I think she started to come to terms with it because she was crying, but ultimately that's when Jane came up saying, yeah, you're kind of effing up, you can't do this, and they kind of drove away. I think this will obviously be addressed in a future episode, whether that's his daughter even finding out where he lives. Dorothy, you guys know what I think of Dorothy. I think she's so sweet, and in this episode we had even more sweet moments. So we had that scene of her saying to her imaginary friends like Herschel and Darling come home, that there's nothing to worry about with Niles going back into the world. He always comes home, even with a present. I feel kind of really sorry for her, because she has so much trust in her dad, even though he's kind of lying to her, to the point where I think we will know where this is going, where it does get revealed that he's dying, he's still dying, and I don't think anything can be done about it, and she's going to make a wish to save his life to a certain Candlemaker. However, though, in the meantime, she plays some hide and seek with her friends Herschel, the big ass spider, who still kind of creeps me out because I do not like spiders, Darling come home, and Danny the brick. But this all led up to that moment where she dropped Danny. I found it hilarious how they were pretending to be a freaking lamppost. That was brilliant. But she dropped Danny. And yeah, but I think everything's going to be fine, because we see the Dannysons and Flex Mantello from the trailer partying in Doom Manor. So I think somehow it will be well. But yeah, again, there was a very specific conversation between Niles and Dorothy, which I have to say, love those scenes between them. They're some of my favorite scenes. That Timothy Dalton and Abigail Shapiro's chemistry is just on fire. Niles was being sweet with Dorothy, just kind of pointing out that we all make mistakes, but it's important to remember that they don't define who we are. And I think that was more of a reassuring point for himself. And sometimes when you make a very big mistake, you have to do more than just apologize. You must try to fix it. Yet again, this perfectly connects to what he's trying to do now in the present day. And as for Victor, Cyborg, this episode looks like things are going very well with Ronnie, if you know what I mean, because they kind of did the deed, and that seemed to make him very happy. Yet it kind of seemed that Cyborg was more into her than what Ronnie was for him. He managed to convince her to go out to that dinner date. However, he got stood up and got sent emails from Ronnie. This contained her disciplinary violations, voluntary manslaughter, and you even see her standing on top of this tank with a load of bodies below. Obviously, this episode highlights past mistakes or actions that you have done, whether you believed in them or not, for a specific reason. So for Chief, he did it for Dorothy. For Ronnie, she obviously did it for a reason. However, it's about they don't define who you are now. And I think this even lends into a tease of the previous episode where she wanted to let that kid who was trying to mug her get away. And that kind of speaks to how she feels about, obviously, herself. She doesn't really think maybe people should be branded a certain way forever. This was kind of shocking to Cyborg. He gets up, kind of walks out. Obviously, she wanted to let him know. That's why the subject of that email was titled Better You Know Now. Obviously, things will come back together for those two because we see them in future scenes from the trailers, and also the other kind of underlying theme of just being there for each other. For example, that scene where Larry just kind of thinks everything will end in pain with him and Rita should just get away, but then she responded saying, I thought I was too once, but then I met you, being a lost cause, that is, and lost causes aren't lost if there's someone to fight for them. And then that hug that Larry just gave her at the end, you could tell he just needed that so bad. This episode will forever be one of my highlights, just for those flashback scenes between those two. But yeah, that was more or less the episode. I know I kind of darted around the place quite a bit with later points, earlier points in this video. The very end was obviously Jane being locked up in the underground. AKA, I think Miranda will be popping up and everyone's going to be like, wait, where's Jane? But this episode, very enjoyable. I think you can understand from my reviews, I talk for ages because I just love it. And honestly, there's been no disappointments. Every episode's had a highlight, a theme, several moments I absolutely love and connect with, makes me love the characters even more. And the addition of Red Jack, the adaptation of him was very good, but so many other things were going on in different areas in this episode that just made everything else, even alongside Red Jack, just as interesting. So that is the end of my 3-episode early access, guys, and I've had a blast. For you, I guess, it's gone very quickly because a lot of you would have binged the 3 episodes. But I guess for this comment section, just let me know what you thought of the 3 episodes overall. I think you can all agree that Doom Patrol is knocking it out of the park this season. But anyway, thank you all so much for watching. I'd really appreciate a like. Join my Discord server to talk about this more with me. But I'm going to leave it there, everyone. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you Doom Patrollers in the next video. Goodbye.